again, like I said, this we have about 40 minutes at this point, and wanted to quickly run you through why did we build Copilot, who are the target users, and what kind of outcomes are we serving. Talk about Copilot at the very high level in terms of what it is. That should take us about 10 minutes in total, and then spend the bulk of the time today walking through an actual application troubleshooting incident, obviously in the training environment, and have one of you teach us how do you actually diagnose and troubleshoot and get to the bottom of a troubleshooting situation using Sumo Logic Copilot. Okay, so that's the plan. And so in terms of, the first thing, why did we build Copilot? So if you look at, we serve two markets, observability and security, but basically on both sides, there are first responders like developers that are troubleshooting application or infrastructure incidents. And then on the security side, there are typically security engineers, SOC analysts, and so on that are responding to security incidents. And generally what you see here is that uh, the resolution time for incidents is more than 30 minutes. Now that's a fairly standard statistic. So in the case of security incidents, it's at least 60 minutes, and it can actually go into days and weeks for the more complicated security incidents, if you will. In the case of application and infrastructure observability, these kinds of incidents are at least 30 minutes long, typically 30 minutes, and can extend into 60 minutes to an hour of downtime, right? So one of the main goals for Copilot is how do you make it easy for first responders to get the insights that they need for diagnosis, investigations, troubleshootings, and things like this, uh, as without being an expert, if you will, in Sumo Logic query language and things like this, right? So reducing time to resolution is a big part of what we talk about. In fact, the way to think about Copilot is as a platform for doing data exploration, investigations, and troubleshooting. That's one of the big headlines that I want to get across today. Uh, a few other statistics that are somewhat interesting here is really that about 1 in 10,000 log searches, you know, end up in an error because of syntax or logic errors, right? So 1 in 10,000 doesn't seem like a bad thing, but the problem is that these kinds of errors happen in the in a crisis, right? When the user is trying to diagnose or troubleshoot downtime, this is when these it's the errors and syntax problems and things like this are hurting them and hurting productivity, right? So one other goal for Copilot is again make it easy so that the bulk of your interactions can be in natural language, in plain English to be specific, and then the system basically generates correct queries for you that helps you overcome these kinds of errors and things like this. A third very important aspect of it is more a side effect of using assistants like Copilot is this notion of team augmentation, right? The basic idea is that if you look at our Sumo Logic customer base, the typical customer has about 3 users of Sumo Logic, but there could be hundreds and thousands of potential users within that particular organization that could benefit from Sumo Logic. So what happens during these application and security incidents typically is that a lot of these three experts that are there in your organizations get overloaded, right? Because they are the only ones who have expertise in Sumo Logic. So in the crisis, everyone points to these three individuals to get the help they need for troubleshooting and investigation. So this idea of overloading experts is fairly common, I would say, in Sumo Logic customer base, as well as the industry at large. So the assistive technologies like Copilot are really about, how do you make the AI a force multiplier for your team such that pretty much anyone in your organization can self-serve the insights they need from a platform like Sumo Logic, right? So that's the basic idea. Again, mean time to resolution is the biggest thing that I would say the key takeaway for why we're trying to do Copilot. In terms of who we're targeting, users and outcomes, if you will, a big part of these kinds of assistive technologies, Sumo Logic Copilot included, is really focused on early career employees, like especially in cybersecurity. What we know anecdotally is because of skills shortage, a lot of cybersecurity professionals are essentially very early in their career, and oftentimes they literally don't know how to do an investigation of a security incident, if you will, right? So that's one end of the spectrum. Somewhere in the middle are basically practitioners. Practitioners are basically, folks that actually know how to do a security investigation or, troubleshooting an application incident, but they just want a little bit of help with respect to Sumo Logic queries itself, perhaps because, they're not using the Sumo Logic platform every day and so on. So Copilot, in terms of what it's designed to do at this time, is to actually focus on these first two segment of users, and the key ideas or key features that you will see within the product, right? So for early career employees, it's really the contextual suggestions. That's the primary engine for how they get productive. It's a thing that you'll see on the right-hand side of Copilot, if you will. And then for practitioners, typically, of course, they can use suggestions, but more often than not, they might be asking questions in plain English, and then the system outputs, queries for them. And one other thing that you'll notice in Copilot is that, besides running log searches, there's a lot of productivity enhancements as well that has to do with adding things to dashboards, visualizing data automatically, and things like this. So you can, oftentimes when you actually see Copilot customers, they pretty much spend their entire Sumo Logic journey within the Copilot experience itself. So it's designed as a fully featured um, experience, if you will, so that you can accomplish most of your day job within Copilot itself without going to any other part of Sumo Logic. And hopefully you get to experience that today. And then the last one, the expert users are the ones that are essentially the three users that I mentioned on my previous slide are basically the experts. So these guys, again, Copilot is typically not a target for them. And the reason is because they are very comfortable with the Sumo Logic query language, and these kinds of assistants in many ways actually hurt their productivity. What they do want instead is some sort of an IDE style experience. And we are working on something called Query Assist, which within the log search page, you can actually start typing a query and then the system basically starts suggesting, operators and aggregations and things like this that actually get you to a fully functioning query quicker, just like you would see in a Visual Studio Code and that kind of thing. So Query Assist is targeted for a quarter from now. And then in Copilot, it's compatible with Query Assist, because in Copilot, what you'll see is that when you ask a question in plain English, we generate and show you the Sumo Logic query. And within that Sumo Logic query, you can actually apply Query Assist as well. Again, not available today, but it's something to watch out for in the next 3-4 months. So that being said, what's the summary in terms of what Copilot does? Again, the headline here is it's expert level insights for investigations and troubleshooting. The first feature that you should experience is this natural language to Sumo Logic queries. So you can ask a question in plain English, system generates a query for you. The other big thing that's like a huge leg up is, again, especially for beginners and early career employees, contextual suggestions. The moment you choose a log source, we start painting suggestions for you on the right-hand side that are the most interesting kinds of questions to ask in that data source. And then every time that you interact, either by clicking on these suggestions or asking a question in English, the system learns from those actions and tries to predict what's the next thing that you should be doing in the suggestions panel. Right, again, hopefully you get to experience that today. For the most part, Copilot is focused on structured logs, and JSON logs and key value logs is typically what we're focusing on today. But that being said, to the extent that you have unstructured logs with field extraction rules or semi-structured logs are logs that have a mix of JSON and non-JSON data in them. Copilot is compatible with that as well. That being said, a few weeks from now, we plan to preview a feature which actually has support for unstructured logs as well without having to write field extraction rules and things like this. But again, that's further down in the roadmap. But for now, understand that it's primarily a system designed to be used with structured logs. One other thing that's a super useful thing, which actually you don't even see in things like ChatGPT today, is this natural language query auto completion. That's just a way of saying that as you start typing in English, just like you see in Google search, the system tries to predict the kind of question that you might be interested in and tries to suggest some completions for you. Again, it's all about productivity, and this query auto completion is a big part of that. Auto visualization, if Copilot can figure out how to render a chart for your data, it actually does that for you. And you'll see examples of that in the hands-on exercise. Right. So for example, if we know that there is latitude, longitude data or geocoding information in the query, we actually construct a map for you automatically. Right. So again, it's something that a lot of users struggle with using in the log search page. And it's these kinds of, in addition to AI, some of these kinds of productivity enhancements are a big part of why Copilot, it helps users get to answers and insights quickly. You also see something called conversation history. Conversation history is basically intended to represent a troubleshooting or investigation session, right? So we'll see examples of that, as we go through the hands-on lab. And then last but not least, the system actually uses large language models, of course, but in a very targeted fashion. It only uses large language models for some pieces of the interactions that you'll see. And in our case, we use Amazon Bedrock. And the reason we point that out specifically here is that it's just another platform as a service technology that Sumo Logic happens to be using. So as you guys are aware, for more than a decade, Sumo Logic has been running on AWS. We use services like EC2, S3, and things like this. And Amazon happens to be Amazon Bedrock, which is our large language model technology, is essentially just like that. And what it helps us demonstrate to you is basically it's an approved and secure data subprocessor, much like any other service that we use from Amazon. And the net of it is that we have had no reason to change any of our data privacy and compliance posture because we're using approved, AWS technology, and we definitely see that as a leg up and differentiation for Copilot as well. Okay, so again, the main headline here is basically if you think about how do you up level this, when you think about AI, you want to be thinking about not just the artificial intelligence, which is helping you do these magical things like translating English to Sumo Logic query, but there is also a lot of classical machine learning as well that's embedded into the experience, right? So that's something that you will notice. And then more importantly, besides the AI and machine learning, there's a number of experiential kinds of things like these kinds of things like auto visualizing charts, trying to guess what source category you might be interested in, and things like that, which are in some cases not even machine learning per se, but they're crucial to the experience and productivity that you're actually experiencing in these kinds of assistants. So again, the key takeaway is that Copilot, think of it as a combination of AI and machine learning, plus a system that heavily relies on a highly curated experience to deliver the value that we are providing for you. All right, at this point, I do want to switch to the hands-on lab. So who do we have?
Bashyam, I don't believe, oh wait, let's see. Oh no, we just, thank you for the thank you. In the Q&A, I was like, oh, we had a volunteer. Just kidding. So Bashyam, no one volunteered. So I was thinking, would it be okay if I did it?
Want to be a volunteer?
Sure. Yeah. Unless I'll
Uh,
give everyone one more chance if you wanted to be a volunteer. And this this is not
but
this is not designed to embarrass anyone. It's designed to help teach. And Bashyam is going to set us up for success.
yes, indeed. So can we make sure that everyone has access to Sumo Logic? So again, the training environment is, let's just do that. How about this? So first thing first, you can actually go into the training environment. So it's service.sumologic.com. And let's see, I can share my screens. I need to stop share and reshare, it looks like.
I'm putting the info in the chat too. So everyone can follow along on your end, which is what the training
So
lab, the lab is for. I will just be sharing my screen as the volunteer, but we encourage everyone to go in here.
So do you want to start? I'll guide you.
Oh, yes,
So,
yes. Okay. Yeah, right. I have to share my
oh,
screen. Okay, hold on. Let's see.
Brian, we have a volunteer. Hold on,
We
Brian, you
do?
can. Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
So
yay!
Brian, no, this is a training environment. Please do not log into your Sumo Logic organization. Just log into the training environment that we'll point you to in a moment. So Brian Henbury, that's our volunteer.
Perfect.
So
Okay, so what I'm gonna do then is, let's see, Brian.
can you promote
Promote,
him to host?
yeah, promote to panelists. There we go. Right. Hey there, Brian.
Hello, hello.
So Brian, step one would be for you to log in, launch service.sumologic.com, and then the user you want to be using. Um, Here we go. So you can, I just pasted a username for you. You just replace that username. It's training plus analyst, and then use some 3-digit number where it says hash, hash, hash.
And then the password's going to be that in the chat.
Yeah, 2025 Sumos GR8.
Sumo's great is what it stands for, I think.
Awesome. Awesome. So you're in. So that's what you should see. Let's see. Now let's make your screen bigger. And so let's switch to the new experience. So on the left-hand side, I think it says, I can't read the screen.
Switch to new UI on the bottom left.
Yes, switch to new UI. Perfect. And can you find Copilot up top? Excellent, excellent. So one of the things, so Brian, you refer, what username did you use?
I added a 123.
Oh, so you went in, okay, I used that already. So excellent. So let's start a new conversation up top, on the top right corner. Right. So at this point, you're basically starting a new troubleshooting session. So the story goes something like this. So Brian has received a Slack notification for what we're calling the astronomy app. It's an e-commerce application for which Brian is notified that the latency for something called the user service has exceeded some threshold, right? So that's the start. And what Brian wants to know is one of the first things you want to do, Brian. In this case, by the way, since we didn't start from a Slack message, the first thing you want to do is to set the timing on the right-hand side of the page, right, to the alert time range. I don't know which time zone you're in, but you want to pick 3 a.m. to 6 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. So go to custom, and then yeah, 3 to 6 a.m. Are you in Pacific time zone, Ryan?
I am Central or Eastern,
Uh,
excuse me.
Eastern. So that'll be, I guess, in your is your Sumo Logic configured for your time zone?
I believe so. Yep.
Yeah, perfect. So try 6 a.m. Although this is probably my because I logged in previously. Actually, it just tries 3 to 6 a.m. because it's probably using what I tried before. And folks on the call, yes, so thank you, Naveen. So folks on the call, can you guys try this on your end? So you want to go to service. Let's give us a moment, Brian, while I.
No problem.
Lisa, would you mind pasting the link to everyone?
Yes.
Service.sumologic.com, and then for the user ID, you should be using training plus analyst, but pick your own 3-digit number. Don't use 123. Pick something else at random. And is there a way for people to confirm that they're in.
I think that's
so Michelle, the user ID is training plus analyst. Where it says hash, just use a random 3-digit number.
But not 1, 2, 3 or 3, 4, 5, because that's what William. We all have to have different ones, otherwise we're logging into the same thing.
Correct. So can we get a thumbs up from some folks that are? Is anyone in? Can you post a message if you're able to log in? Thank you, Kyle. Thank you, Kyle.
Yep.
All right. So Jason and Michelle, they're both in. Awesome. So let's get going. So again, one of the things that you would notice, and just like depending on time zone, can Michelle, Kyle, Jason logged in, but Copilot is not showing in the top right.
William,
So
maybe just try a different. Don't do 3, 4, 5. Have you tried a different set of 3 numbers?
it's on the top. It's on the top left, or on the left-hand side of the navigation screen. If you're on the bento screen, it's part of one of the tabs, where you can open up like a new search tab. Copilot is one of the tabs.
So William, yeah. So look on switch to the new UI and then find Copilot.
Got it. Perfect.
Thank you, William. Thank you. So again, for folks on the call, again, depending on your time zone, would you mind switching? The first thing you want to try is to make sure that someone raised their hand. Do we have a question?
No,
Okay.
it got lowered. Yeah, I think we're fine.
All right. So folks, can you make sure that the source category that's selected is, it should say, oh man, so I need to log back in. I'm not able to read this. Yeah, thank you. Labs/astronomy/logs, if it isn't already selected for you. That's what you want to do. And then more importantly, the time range picker. So Brian, maybe show them the time range picker. Set that to 3 a.m. to 6 a.m. Pacific time, right? All right, so now again, so the story here is that Brian got an alert. It's for the astronomy app. It's for the user service. So let's just try something really something basic. So just say, show me recent logs. Just type show me recent logs. Yeah, you can actually, so now that's auto completion. You can pick that, run it, and just to get a sense for what's in the data. That's all we're doing here. So if you can zoom in, these are essentially API logs that's coming from Brian's e-commerce application. So you can see service, which is the name of the microservice. It talks about the latency value, the source of the request, which is the source IP address, the API endpoint that's being hit, and then the timestamp, right? Very basic, and then a status code, HTTP status code as well, right? So again, we have a sense for the logs at this time, again, by simply asking a question. So the first thing, so we know that latency is high for this application. So the first thing that, Brian, you may want to try is, so we know that, the latency is high, but one of the first conjectures you might have for why that is so high is because your request volume went up. So Brian, perhaps you can ask a question in English. So type the word visualize. See what kind of perfect. So you see a suggestion there. Visualize service request volumes per service over the minute. Yeah, click on that. Let's see what happens. Okay, so I think your time range is probably not as, so maybe you should change your time range to perhaps the Eastern time zone, maybe 6 to 9. And then hit the blue bar again. Perfect. So what this is showing you, so again, in this application, just to give you the story a little bit, there are 3 different microservices. User service is one of them, and then you got some other things as well, like payment service, auth service, and so on. And as the spike, which is you got a spike for user service latency. That's what the Slack alert would have told you. But then one thing that Brian has confirmed as a first hypothesis is that the traffic to the user service has actually gone up as well. That's the number of requests, right? So that's the reason. So now we need to work out, okay, so traffic has gone up. So that's one clue, but why did traffic go up in the first place? So to do that, so perhaps the first diagnostic that Brian may want to do is, try this, right? So perhaps you not just want to look at the user service itself, but try the, you should type 95th percentile. Just try typing 95 in the search bar, and let's see. Yeah, the second suggestion, calculate the 95th percentile latency. Yeah, so here the idea there is that, yeah, the service is made up of multiple API endpoints. So I know that the service is slow overall, but here you're trying to diagnose which of many services is actually slow, right? So that's what this generated query is doing for you. And then what Brian can quickly see is that among everything, the user services register, which is the, actually, would you mind typing sort at the end of your plain English prompt? Yeah, just hit enter. So as you can see, yeah, thank you, Brian. So it says here that the register API, once the screen refreshes, yeah, the register API is definitely the one that's slow. So now you have a clue that it's not just the user service, but it's actually specifically the register endpoint that's experiencing latency. So then you need to figure out, okay, what is going on with the register endpoint. So for that, perhaps, Brian, try this. So type register in the auto completion. No. Just clear everything. Just clear everything out, and then start typing register. Yeah. So one of the suggestions you'll see is count register requests by status code, service, and API. Yeah, pick that. And what Brian right now is doing is that he's trying to diagnose for the user service and the register API endpoint what kind of HTTP status codes are coming up. So again, this is to check if there are any errors. And again, if you hit add a sort at the end of that statement, yeah, you will see that this particular endpoint is experiencing a lot of 503 errors. Right, quite a few 503 errors, again, during the alert time range. So again, 503 errors, just for background, this is basically essentially an API or server that is actually extremely busy and it's not able to keep up with requests, right? So again, so you have some clue that it's the user service, it's a register endpoint, and you know that it's being busy, it's erroring out with this 503 status. So now so now again you need to go further down. So what might be going on? So why is this endpoint busy? So Brian, any hypothesis that comes to your mind? Why is this endpoint busy? Anything that comes to mind?
Not off the bat, no.
All right. So let me give you. So some of the hints are obviously we know that requests have gone up. That's already confirmed. So that's not the root cause. But we need to figure out. Okay, requests have gone up, but why have the requests gone up? Right. So the requests have gone up could have been for a few causal factors. Well, actually, we know requests have gone up and latency is also high. So one of the things that you may want to try is to see if you made any recent code deployments, because that often tends to be one of the reasons for why your application is misbehaving all of the time. So for that, what I would do is that there's actually a different source category on the left-hand side. So on the left, pick the changelog. Yeah, pick the changelog source category, and let's just make sure on the right your time range is still the alert time range, whatever you picked, I think 6 to 9 a.m. And then, hit enter. And then you see the first suggestion on the right-hand side. This is contextual suggestions, where it says show me log messages. Perfect, thank you. So this is actually showing you the format of these log messages. And then one thing you may want to check. So if you go back to suggestions, let's see if there is a suggestion. The second suggestion, or the third suggestion, count the number of deployments for each application. Let's just pick that suggestion. And it shows that there were deployments during the alert time range, but they were actually for the payment service and the auth service, but not for the user service. So now you can eliminate code deployments related to the user service as a probable cause, right? So then let's do this. Let's go to conversation history. So again, at this point, you know that latency is high, requests are high. You have not done any code deployments for that particular user service. But let's go to the history again, because we want to come back to history on the right-hand side. There's a little, So again, now you can see what Brian has done in the last 10 minutes or so. So let's switch back to the application logs itself. So let's go back to the fourth query. Yeah, click. And let's see if we can run it again. Yeah, go for it. So at this point, you go back to where you left off during the investigation. So you should see the time range is set correctly for you at this point, right? Now, again, so at this point, what you want to think about is, requests are high. I didn't do any code deployments. The other causation is that perhaps somebody's trying to attack your application, right? Like a DDoS attack, so perhaps you may want to try, again, type register and see if you see any suggestions. Let's see.
Count by service and API.
No, you've already done that. So,
503.
Try typing 503 because you're trying to diagnose 503 errors. So, perfect. The second suggestion from the top. Yeah, click on it. Okay, now what it's trying to do for you is to actually analyze all the 503 errors. Now it's a fairly complicated query that Brian has generated here. And it's trying to do a lookup in a threat intelligence feed. So let's take all the 503 errors and try and find out if those 503 errors are originating from particular IP addresses. And you see that a couple of IP addresses are dominating there. And then you can see that, those are malicious actors as well. All right, so now you have a clue that you are under an attack. So let's do something interesting. So perhaps you want to know, okay, so where are these requests coming from? So I see that you have a particular IP address. So let me, I think it's 154 or whatever. So let's try this, Brian. So can you type geo? Yeah, perfect. No, actually, you saw that suggestion. Count requests by. Okay, so what this is actually trying to do for you now is uh, uh, so basically these are all the requests that are originating from that particular malicious IP address and targeting your application. And then you can definitely zoom in on the red dot, right? So a lot of the requests are actually coming from somewhere in Hong Kong, if you will. Right, that's basically what it is showing. So again, the main idea here is that one of the key ideas in Copilot this time is that it not just translated the query for you, but it actually visualized it. This is the auto visualization capability, right? So the main conclusion that you can draw at this point is that the reason for your slowness is because your application is under attack from specific. It's basically a distributed DDoS attack. So multiple IP addresses are actually making requests to your application and trying to bring it down. And that's the reason your register API and the user service is not able to keep up, right? At this point, the main conclusion, yeah, again, you went from latency, felt like a latency problem, to actually a security incident where you're actually getting attacked, right?
Right.
And so that's the main conclusion here. At this point, the action that you want to take is to very immediately block block those IP addresses in your firewall. That's a couple of IP addresses that you saw. You can always go back to the conversation history and block those IP addresses that you found, and then go forward with the rest of the remediation steps, if you will. All right. Perfect. So that in a nutshell. So thank you, Brian, for playing.
Yeah,
so
no problem.
Yes,
hopefully,
thank you.
hopefully you guys got an idea. So again, this is in this particular example that Brian showed you today. I would argue that this is more at the level of a uh, practitioner who knows how to do troubleshooting. But the main value that Copilot offered for Brian in this case is to sort of guide him or nudge him along based on the kinds of hypotheses that he may have had, right? So for example, investigating load or requests, investigating code deployments, analyzing, drill down by dimension like API endpoints and things like this. And then, looking for suggestions related to threat actors and things like this, right? So the main idea, although it wasn't fully trying to diagnose and troubleshoot automatically, it gave him a lot of suggestions or hints based on a mental model or framework that Brian probably already had, right, in terms of how to do this investigation. So the main value is really around some of the contextual suggestions, the auto completions that you saw, and then the ability to ask questions in plain English, right? And then again, going back to the conversation history and then switching back to a previous query, because in troubleshooting, it's never a straight path, right? So people may be working multiple incidents at the same time. That's one of the reasons you have conversations that multiple you may want to start multiple conversations because you're working on two different incidents at the same time. But within one incident, go back to the conversation history to pick up, because troubleshooting, think of it as a tree. So you started from a certain hypothesis, ran a few searches, hit a dead end, couldn't find an answer. Then you go back and then try a different branch of the tree, right? That's the main idea behind a conversation history, so that you can always go back to where you left off and then resume the investigation at a different point or a different hypothesis, if you will. Okay, so hopefully that was useful. And so this here, I just want to quickly play this video. So for folks that had trouble keeping up, this is the actual, let me make sure I share my computer sound and then play the video. In this video, okay, can you hear my voice in the video?
Yes.
Okay, let's cue this up again. In this video, we'll learn how you can use Sumo Logic Mo Copilot to diagnose and troubleshoot an application incident. As an on-call engineer, I get a Slack notification regarding high latency for the user service, a critical service for my e-commerce app. Slowness in this service means end users may abandon my app and shop elsewhere. I can start troubleshooting the issue right away using Copilot. Notice that the context is already set to the application logs. Given latency, my first hypothesis is to check for load by simply asking for a visualization of load by microservice. Indeed, load on the user service has spiked recently. Notice how Copilot cleverly added the transpose operator in the generated query and auto-visualized the results. Clearly, user service is experiencing a request spike, but why? By clicking on a contextual suggestion, I can get recent latency stats for all services, including the user service. Next, as I type latency, Copilot suggests latency-related autocompletions. The P95 of latency by service and API reveals that the register endpoint of the user service is slow. To make sure, I can actually add a sort keyword in the natural language query to sort the latency in descending order of latency. Again, the P95 of latency for the register endpoint of the user service is indeed high. This implies that new users are not able to register and I'm losing signups to my app. To verify if recent code deployments are the root cause, I can switch to the change logs for my app and pick a contextual suggestion for app deployments, which shows that there were deployments in the last 3 hours, but not for the user service. This eliminates app deployments as a probable cause. But what else might be causing slowness? Through the conversation history, I resume troubleshooting and application logs. Since I already know that the register endpoint is slow, I type register and pick an autocompletion that analyzes register endpoint load by API status code. This reveals that HTTP 503 errors have spiked, implying that my server is busy. But why? I type 503 and pick an autocompletion that slices HTTP 503 error traffic by IP addresses. This suggestion also checks if any of those traffic sources are malicious users. The generated query contains a threat intelligence lookup by IP address. Indeed, 2 IP addresses are malicious and are trying to bring my app down by overloading it with requests. I can then ask Copilot to pivot to one of those IP addresses to map the malicious user's location. Again, Copilot translated the intent, does a geolookup, and automatically mapped the results. Zooming in, we see the malicious IP is located in Florida. If needed, I can add this panel, like any other panel that you saw in this demo, to a dashboard. To summarize, as an on-call engineer, I conclude that my register API endpoint is a victim of a denial of service attack. My next step would be to block the malicious IP addresses in my firewall and restore my app. All right, so again, this is essentially mostly similar to what Brian was showing you today. right? And just to give you a flavor for, how do you go from the high level symptom in Slack to, working out through a series of hypotheses and using Copilot to actually nudge you to get to a, problem resolution quickly, right? So let's see, I think that's all I had.